Joining me is Professor Peter Woolstencroft from the University of Waterloo, speaking on the Kitchener Centre by-election. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad I have the pleasure of meeting you today. I know your name, and I've seen your analysis out in the public sphere, and it's quite a pleasure to meet you today. So, just getting right down to the election, we're here for the Kitchener by-election, and as we know, this riding has been NDP since 2018.
Yes.
And it was Liberal for a long time before that, but we might see a change coming up with the Green riding so close in Guelph, and the riding is federally Green. And then, of course, we saw Santa Claus Parade. Santa Claus came to town, and so did Elizabeth May, and of course, Mike Schreiner showing their support. Do you have any sort of expectations? What do you think might be happening in this election? Do you see history being made, maybe?
Well, it could be, and a very famous political scientist wrote a book entitled 50 British By-Elections, because most of the time by-elections are not very important or interesting, about as meaningful as a puff of wind on a summer's day. But every once in a while something happens, and that's what this political scientist was talking about. And in Canadian history there have been some very important by-elections. Now this one is unusual because each of the parties has some claim and is looking at their competitive situation. So the Conservatives held the seat at the turn of the century. It was a Conservative seat, and there's a Conservative vote here. As you said, quite rightly, the Greens hold it federally and local support and Mike Schreiner. It's an NDP seat. Somewhat unexpectedly became a seat too in 2018. And then the Liberal Party used to be the dominant party, had 2 MPs in this century, but they have a long way to go from last time. Same with the Greens. And I'm not too sure if the citizens of Kitchener Centre are very interested in this by-election. I have to say that.
Okay.
But the parties are very interested because they know that in the next election, 2 of the 4 party leaders will be new. Mike Schreiner is still a fresh face. They've been here a bit. And then they're all going to be trying to beat Doug Ford. And so this is perhaps a barometer for what's going to happen down the line. There were 2 by-elections in Ontario in the summer, and the Liberals won both of them. One was a big surprise.
And remind me what level that was. What were the 2 by-elections?
One in the Ottawa area, provincially.
Provincially, yes.
Yeah, and then one in Scarborough. The Conservatives had a very strong candidate, but did not run very well.
And that was federal as well?
No, provincial.
Provincial, okay.
Provincial. I'm talking
Understood.
about just provincial stuff.
Okay.
And the Liberals are be choosing a leader on December the 2nd. 2 days after this by-election result. I'm sure the Conservatives called it before that leadership result because they didn't want the new leader to be swanning around Kitchener Centre saying, here I am, follow me to the great and glorious future that I will deliver. So that can't happen. We don't know who the leader of the Liberal Party.
Right, that's still a big question mark, isn't it?
Big question mark.
Yeah.
And our parliamentary system, lamentably, is based on party leaders. People even use language which is not consistent with parliamentary practice, but say, oh, when we elect a premier or elect a prime minister. I mean, my back goes up when I hear that, but I hear it all the time, so I give up fighting the battle, because we don't elect these people. We elect people who are elected to the House of Commons or the Queen's Park, and they, in effect, choose the leader. So that's the idea. But now people basically are in a general election are asked the question of which party leader do you want to have as a premier. You don't have that in a by-election, so people are free. That's why there's more volatility, if you will, in by-elections, because the fate of the government doesn't depend on the result of the Kitchener Centre. So they're free to vote as freely as they want to vote. And they can say, well, maybe in the last election I voted this way or that way because I didn't want this to happen, but now I can vote my true choice.
And hence the barometer analogy as well.
Yeah, and so people will be looking at the results. The party people will say, okay, what's going on here? But the thing that we don't know, and nobody can really predict, is what will the turnout be? Now, the turnout in provincial elections in Ontario recently has been bad. Last time it was 43%.
Oh, wow.
I mean, dismal performance. People ask me who's going to win. I said, I have no idea. I hope the turnout is better than in the 20s, but I'm afraid I'm going to be right. It's going to be in the 20s.
And yeah, the engagement really is more important, that we can understand.
Well, I want people to be engaged. I want people to think about it and make a decision, and I want citizen involvement. That's one so important in our society, and yet most people go, oh, I'm too busy, I'm going bowling tonight. So they don't go vote.
So the decision, whatever decision we come to in Kitchener Centre, how does that affect the landscape of Ontario as a whole, depending on what color it goes?
Well, if the NDP loses a seat, that's a big hit, because that's their seat. They had it for 2 elections. They lose it in a by-election with a very competent candidate in Deb Chapman, experienced politician, and knows the community. So if she loses, that's a big setback for the NDP. Kelly Stice, an experienced citizen and has run in elections, had a lot of experience in the community. The Liberals will be hopeful that they can pull off another upset as they did in the summertime.
Do they have official party status, or is this something they need?
No, they need.
They need it, yeah.
And this would help. And the Greens, of course, are desperate to win another seat. And they were in the last election. They were touted to win the seat in Parry Sound, Muskoka, and they came close, but they didn't. Mike Schreiner needs somebody, and he needs to be able to say to people, "We are on the rise," and it's hard for him to say that. So that's and in the Conservatives, of course, get basically 25% of the vote. There's a federal vote around that level and provincial around that level. They'll be hopeful to be around 25%. I think it's going to be very hard for them to come close to that. If they get over 20, I'll be surprised.
Okay, so those are sort of...
And I just made a prediction, and I'm told in my head, don't do that, but I just did it.
So you have a prediction about who will not be successful. But any feelings, any gut feelings about what color might come out on top for this?
Well, I know people in the 3 campaigns, Liberal, NDP, and Greens. So I'm not going to say what I think is going to happen, but I will say that they have been very energetically campaigning, and we see signs and so on. And that tells me that they have people working for them. They have resources that you need, like money, and they have an infrastructure to get people out to vote.
That's right, and especially too, I as well. I know 2 of the candidates quite well, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on those campaigns and all 3 campaigns. And there's a bit of door-to-door knocking and networking as well within the various community events.
Yes, there. Well, in fact, I was at an event, and people from the NDP, Liberal, and Green campaigns were there, and they were all having a very friendly discussion because they respect each other as people who are committed to the political process. And I could feel the energy and the excitement and the commitment.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was a great discussion. I do wish we had more time, but thank you so much, Professor, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And giving your views on the Kitchener by-election.
You're welcome.